Gentlemen, we have called you together to inform you that we are going to overthrow the United States government. Do you still think that jet fuel brought down the World Trade Center? Does anybody else see a problem here? If the government has nothing to hide, why are they so afraid to answer a few questions? This story does not add up. Listen to me, listen to your head. Don't listen to anything they say.
The UN has put out dozens of public documents where they're calling for an 80% world population reduction. In fact, at the Beijing Women's Conference, the World Conference, back in 1997, the head of the UN Food Program said, we will use food as a weapon, and we will use food as a weapon, and we will use food as a weapon, and we will use food as a weapon against the people.
How many people do you know these days with a neurological disorder? How many family members or people in your circle of friends have something like fibromyalgia or lupus? How about a brain tumor? Studies in the New England Journal of Medicine show a growing trend in the rate of such disorders in recent years. I also became a statistic when I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. It was the summer of the Great Fire in Tucson, Arizona, when I began my research and traveled across this country to find the truth.
And again, it's this variability in your sensitivity to toxins. Some people may notice very little, if anything. A majority of people will have one of a number of symptoms, because we know that the aspartame, because it is a poison that affects protein synthesis, because it affects how the synapse operates in the brain, and because it affects DNA, can affect numerous organs. So you can get a lot of different symptoms that seem unconnected.
This is Darren McBreen, our reporter, out talking to local Austinites about aspartame, the defecation of a bioweapons bacteria produced by the Pentagon in 1963, that they finally got approval after 3 rounds in 1979 with Monsanto when they bought Searle. And it is an addictive excitotoxin that causes brain damage, pancreatic cancer, you name it. It breaks down into formaldehyde in the bloodstream, but it's very addictive. Most poisons are addictive. Arsenic's addictive. And so here's his report. We're going to have an expanded part 2, and Darren in studio with us this evening. Here is that report, and then we're going to skip this network break. We're going to continue with the forced fluoridation. And again, the forced inoculation laws now finally going into place. They always ran the hoax. It was the law. Now that people are standing up, taking their cities back, the globalists are like, no, 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 no. You're going to drink our toxic waste. Here's the report on aspartame.
Thousands of popular diet and sugar-free foods and beverages contain an artificial sweetener that researchers say may cause cancer. The ingredient is aspartame, and it is by far the most dangerous substance on the market that is added to our foods. Aspartame is an artificial sweetener found in thousands of products worldwide, and chances are you are consuming it. It's added to sugar-free gum, juice beverages, tabletop sweeteners like Equal and NutraSweet. It's in cereals, soft drinks, yogurt, breath mints, multivitamins, wine coolers, and even over-the-counter medicines. The toxic long-term effects of aspartame are often dismissed as a hoax by the sweetener industry. However, numerous independent controlled studies using human subjects have concluded that aspartame is deadly. Now, there's a number of studies that claim that aspartame is completely safe to consume, but the vast majority of those studies were conducted by, well, you guessed it, the aspartame industry. In fact, groups like Monsanto, J.D. Searle, and ILSI concluded that aspartame posed no health risk. But that's about as credible as Marlboro, Camel, and Winston, dismissing the link between cigarette smoking and cancer.
Tastes good like a cigarette.
have you heard of aspartame?
Yes, I've heard of it before.
Have you heard good things or bad things?
I hear mostly bad things about it.
What kind of bad things?
Just like it's an artificial sweetener and it's bad for your health and you should try to stay away.
I've heard it's an artificial sweetener, and I'm guilty of drinking beverages sweetened with it. However, it degenerates and it does harmful things.
What do you think about aspartame?
I don't like it. It gives me headaches.
They did studies on rats. It supposedly causes cancer.
Even Fox News recently reported in 2005 that artificial sweeteners had been linked to a wide range of cancers after studying involving rats. So these rats actually had tumors the size of golf balls. So does that concern you when you hear stuff like that?
Greatly, yes. And the FDA is supposed to be protecting us from things like cancer, not giving it to us and telling us it's safe.
You cannot go to the grocery store now and buy any type of even regular sugar gum that hasn't had aspartame added to it. In the 1970s, Searle tried to get it approved, and they couldn't. It took them 3 separate times because in their own studies with monkeys, large portions of them that were fed it died and contracted cancer. Now we have mainstream news articles, and the EU has done a major study finding lower birth weights, early birth, and yes, miscarriages from women that drink aspartame-laden soft drinks like Coke Zero.
Do you think that aspartame should be on the market today?
No.
Why not?
Because it hasn't been demonstrated to be safe.
The FDA looked at the research and in 1975 put aspartame's approval on hold. It set up an independent panel of doctors to study aspartame. In 1980, that public board of inquiry unanimously ruled aspartame should not go on the market. Edith was drinking a cup of low-calorie hot chocolate that night. Aspartame made it sweet. And Johnson says aspartame made her sick.
All of a sudden, I couldn't see. My eyes went out of focus, and it was like my vision became quite blurred.
And you think it's because of aspartame?
I think it's very deliberately because of aspartame, yes.
It was terrifying. Kate Randall thought she was going crazy.
I started popping in my hands and twitching in my feet, my legs, my knees, my upper legs, and shoulders and arms and everywhere.
Many of these individuals who have been aspartame reactors have tested themselves 5, 10, 20 times. Every time getting the same response, and then they realized that this was a legitimate cause and effect relationship.
What is aspartame? It is the fecal matter of the E. coli bacteria. They took it and genetically engineered it. They could feed it toxic waste, and then it defecates aspartame. And it has so many bad health effects, it's just unspeakable.
How do you think a product like that was managed to be approved by the FDA?
Oh, I think there's loopholes to everything.
I say shut the FDA down, shut down any government agency that's not doing its job.
Would you think that possibly the FDA is corrupt?
I'm going to go ahead and say no. I trust the FDA with my health.
Do you think there's a chance the FDA could be corrupt?
About as big a chance as any other part of our government.
Now, the FDA approval of aspartame was highly contested and subject to multiple congressional hearings and scientific criticism. In fact, aspartame was continuously rejected by the FDA for over 15 years until it was finally approved in 1981. Since that time, the FDA has published a list of 92 symptoms of aspartame poisoning, which includes headaches, vision loss, including blindness, seizures, neurological problems, cardiovascular problems, and death. The FDA even admits adverse reactions to aspartame comprise about 80% of consumer complaints it reaches each year. Yet the dangerous substance remains on the market and is consumed by millions of people every single day. I'm Darren McBreen for InfoWars Nightly News.
All right, great job from Darren on that front. We're going to get into fluoride being forcibly out of the water here in a moment, but just expanding on this, you notice in the last 5, 6, 7 years, something big has happened. All of these companies have come out with stevia or other artificial sweeteners, and they advertise, and most people now try to bypass aspartame. So what did the aspartame makers do? They proliferated. It is in most sugar candy. Read the back. It is in chocolate bars. It is in almost every form of sugar gum. I know I've got children, and I go to the grocery store, and you cannot find it without it. It's in most of the over-the-counter medication you take, just spiked into pills you're supposed to just swallow anyways. It is in all sorts of different foods, tens of thousands. And it is addictive. It is a neurotoxin. And I talk to so many people, young and old, who are going, yeah, I got macular degeneration, I'm losing my sight. They won't tell me why. And it's well known in the studies that it made the monkeys go blind. And what do you think wood alcohol does? What do you think old moonshine that isn't made right and gets wood alcohol in it does? It makes you go blind. It's grain alcohol. It's what you want to be drinking if you're going to do that. It breaks down in, just look it up for yourself. And I know most of you know this, but it just illustrates how out of control the system is. Now, look at this article. And I've got a couple of these. New Jersey Assembly Panel passes bill to add fluoride to public water. I did a video on this last night. It's up at Infowars.com. Water companies in New Jersey would be required to add fluoride to the water supply under a bill approved Monday by an assembly panel at the urging of dentists and public health professionals, despite objections from environmentalists and utility officials. They don't tell you here that the majority of the EPA's and FDA scientists have gone public to Congress, thousands of them signing letters saying it gives you cancer, that it causes brain damage. They just act like urging from the dentist. You mean the American Dental Association, who's been forced to tell people under 5 not to brush with it? It says on the back it's poison. It actually causes dental fluorosis and dental problems. And it's not just sodium fluoride they're adding. It's toxic waste, hundreds of chemicals they call fluoride. But regardless, let's say it's the best thing since sliced bread. The government's going to force medicate us, and counties and cities pass laws saying get it out. Before it was just lobbyists paying them to do it. And they say, oh, we're going to pass a state law and make you do it. And then I saw an article, I've got it here in my stack out, where all over the country, Michigan was the first article I saw, they're coming in and saying, we've got to certify your well is safe. You've got to send in for testing every month to us. Why don't you just get on fluoridation? We're gonna tax you to use your own well water as well. Here's one out of Arkansas. State passes fluoridation law. Coalition created. And it goes on to say a statewide fluoridation measure and 2 other bills aimed at improving oral health in Arkansas were passed and signed into law. Pushed by the State Dental Association, who's paid off by the big chemical makers. And just type in fluoride bone cancer, fluoride brain damage, fluoride pineal gland, thyroid malfunction. You wonder why women all got their hair falling out, why women almost, now it's upwards, in some areas, half the women, on average it's over 30%, have thyroid problems. Just killing our women especially. And they just get away with it. They just get away with all of it. They think it's funny. And now in California, they're saying we're going to inoculate your kids, but without authorization. The UN has put out dozens of public documents where they're calling for an 80% world population reduction. In fact, at the Beijing Women's Conference, the World Conference, back in 1997, the head of the UN Food Program said, we will use food as a weapon. And we will use food as a weapon. And we will use food as a weapon. And we will use food as a weapon against the people.